Everyone remembers that one boss fight, which almost made them quit a game entirely. Not necessarily because it was unfair, but because it felt like a test. Skill obviously plays a factor, but it's also a test of your mental fortitude. It's a test of whether or not you're willing to stay and persist. It's moments like these, as painful as they are, that make victories feel so satisfying. Now, when I talk about difficult boss fights, I'm not talking about straight up bad game design like this guy. I'm referring to well-designed boss fights that allow the player to adapt, to learn, and to consistently improve with each attempt. These bosses might not be seen as fun when you first fight them, but I guarantee you remember the fight that took you dozens of attempts over the painfully easy boss that you wiped out in a single go. It's that sense of overcoming a challenge that makes these moments stick with us. When you go into a fight completely blind and you have no idea about what you're going to be facing next, it's common for the first few attempts to be complete failures. Panic dodging, button mashing, and feeling frustrated just comes with the territory. What I believe is that this frustration isn't just related to the difficulty of the boss. It's more about the factor of uncertainty. It's like sitting a math test without knowing which topics are actually going to be covered. Take Cynthia, for example, who's arguably one of the hardest boss fights in the 2D Pokémon era, and even considered to be more difficult in the Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl remakes. A lot of Pokémon fans still remember the shock of finding her inside a random house in Pokémon Black and White 2, where she forces you into a random battle. The first time you go up against her, you have no idea what her team looks like. It doesn't help that her team consists of Pokemon that counters to all 3 of the Gen 4 starters. There's a very real chance that you just get destroyed by her Garchomp, especially if you're underleveled. A big reason as to why she's remembered as such a difficult boss is because most players are just straight up unprepared. When you don't know what's coming, every loss feels heavier because you're not sure if you're messing up or if you just didn't have the information yet. You're forced to react instead of being able to plan. Now, imagine how different an experience like this would be if you already knew her full lineup. You'd have time to prepare counters, to adjust your team, and even the freedom to grind by reloading a save point. She'd still be tough, but she wouldn't feel impossible. This is the difference that adaptation makes. Most people don't quit because they can't physically win. Most of the time, they quit because they can't handle the constant game overs and deaths. They stop believing that any progress is happening. It's a strange feeling because you can spend hours on a single fight without actually winning, but you are improving. I remember when I was playing Kingdom Hearts 3 and I was trying to beat Yozora, who's arguably the toughest boss in the entire series. To make it even worse, I was playing on critical modes, which is the hardest base difficulty. I spent close to 5 or 6 hours on this fight, and there were definitely moments where I wanted to snap my controller in half. But slowly, I started getting further. I began recognizing his attacks, learning what to look out for, and understanding when I could actually go on the offensive. I was still failing, but I was adapting. And to me, that's one of the best and worst feelings, because while the constant losses weigh you down, you can feel that you're improving and getting closer. Eventually, I was able to defeat him, and I enjoyed the fight so much that I decided to test myself even further by attempting a run with no hits taken. I had a lot of free time during this period because I was on break from university, so I made an effort to just practice this fight for a few hours. I eventually became so good at fighting him that I was able to do an attempt where I took no damage, and to this day, it's one of my most memorable moments from a video game. What makes fights like this so exhausting isn't just the execution, it's the emotional whiplash. You'll have attempts where everything feels perfect and then you die instantly on the next run. That back and forth messes with your confidence more than the boss itself. Learning to stay calm through that and trusting that progress isn't always linear is a skill on its own. That moment when things finally start to click is where the satisfaction really comes from. Instead of dying in the first 10 seconds, you slowly start to survive longer and longer. 10 seconds turns into 20. 20 turns into 30. You might even enter the second phase of the boss fight. Beating the boss is one thing, but that feeling of making progress is just as satisfying, if not more. In a weird way, video games can be a huge test of patience and endurance. I know that sounds a little dramatic, but think about what I just said. How many games have you dropped because something became too difficult and the frustration just wasn't worth it anymore? Now compare that to the feeling of finally beating a boss that you've been stuck on for hours. Being able to put your ego aside and accept that you're going to fail, probably quite a lot, isn't an easy thing to do. The time that's spent failing isn't necessarily wasted, it's just invested towards your eventual victory. I said something similar earlier in the video, but the simplest way I can describe it is to think of it like you're studying for a math exam. You might have 5 different topics you need to learn before the test. In the same way, a boss fight might have 5 different attacks that you need to understand. Learning those topics takes time, just like learning those attack patterns does. All that effort is put towards one goal, passing the exam with a high mark, or finally winning the fight. That's why it feels so good when you succeed. Your success was earned, it wasn't given. Most of that growth isn't obvious while it's happening. You don't notice it mid-battle. You notice it when you suddenly dodge an attack without thinking or punish a move that used to catch you every single time. These small moments don't feel like wins at first, but they're the reason the final victory even happens. In the end, it's never really about the boss. It's about whether you're willing to sit with failure long enough to understand it. Difficult fights force you to slow down, to pay attention, and accept that progress doesn't always look like winning. When you finally do succeed, it's not because the game went easy on you, it's because you stuck around long enough to figure it out. You struggled, you learned, and you finished it. Sometimes that's really all it takes to have an impact.